Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome and good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. We're glad you're here, whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we acknowledge with humility that our buildings sit on Monacan land. My name is Brandon Knuckles. My pronouns are he, him. And I've been attending this congregation since I moved here in February 1st and returned to Lynchburg. I'm a Lynchburg native and was born and raised here, so I'm glad to be part of this congregation. If you are visiting with us for the first time, we're glad you chose to be here this morning and to participate in our service for this church community we love. If you would like to receive our monthly newsletter and Friday email updates, please fill out the virtual visitor card found on our website. And it's also under the Sunday services, or fill out the yellow card found in the back of the chairs in front of you. And place it in the basket as we are collecting the offering. This morning, our young people are invited to go straight to their class. Having seen no young people here, they have already done that. We look forward to their return next week. And our theme for this month is delight. And this week is full of celebration. Happy Father's Day. Tomorrow is filled with Juneteenth events. And Wednesday, as we honor the summer solstice this Wednesday, may we delight in the coming of summer. And please take a note of the announcements in the bulletin. And if you are on Zoom, you can find them in the Friday e-news. Now, I invite you to release your worries about the world and our own lives as we enter into the service by taking some slow, calming breaths. Let us light the chalice. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life.
Please rise as embody your spirit as we share together hymn 207, Earth Was Given as a Garden.
Empowering the fathers of this world. Today is Father's Day, a day in which we honor and offer gratitude for our fathers in whatever form or fashion they come into our lives. Biological fathers, stepfathers, adoptive and foster fathers, grandparents, spiritual fathers, and all of the uncles, brothers, and friends who, whether they know it or not, have helped to fill the role of father in someone's life. We are shaped by their presence and their absence, by how they choose to act and when they abstain, what they say, and when they remain silent. Let us remember today and always the impact that these people have on us as individuals and as a community. And let us also remember that this relationship is not one-sided and that we are, as a community, are called to support and empower the fathers of this world, no matter how they came into their roles and regardless of their relative successes or failures. Let us raise up their triumphs, and let us have the grace to forgive them their all too human failures. Let us love our fathers and each other.
We take an offering of our gifts for the work of this community, both within this building and in the larger community. This week is rich with meaningful holidays. Father's Day is certainly important to us. Juneteenth charges us to remember the painful reality of slavery in our country's past that contributes to and influences attitudes and lives through acts of racism and exclusion to this day. May we, in remembering and celebrating the freedom found in Juneteenth, may it help chart a new path for our nation and all those affected by racism. And then summer solstice celebrations this week shape cultures and religions across the earth and are grounded in our understanding of our place within Earth's cycles and seasons. Wednesday is the longest day of the year, my favorite day. Thursday begins the slow descent of the light toward the winter solstice. David Breeden wrote a short poem entitled "The Solstice Teaches Us."
The solstice teaches us that darkness comes, that darkness goes. The solstice teaches us that light comes, that light goes. The solstice teaches us calmly, silently, to be calm, silent, learning. The solstice teaches us as we circle the sun that everything flies. The solstice teaches us to remember the dark, to remember the light, to remember time, the seasons, and love as we circle the sun.
Thank you. It is our tradition to share in the midst of our community the joy to turn to number 584 in our gray hymnal, and let's share the words of Dr. King. "584, the network of mutuality. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted.
Hatred and bitterness never cure the disease of fear.
We must evolve for all human conflict a method that rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation.
The foundation of such a method is love.
Before it's too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds, which precipitate and perpetuate war.
One day we must concede that peace is not merely a distant goal, but the seed by means by which we arrive at the goal.
We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means.
We shall hew out
of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. Let us now share a few moments of silence as we honor all that's been shared here, as well as our commitment to build the beloved community. Spirit of life, we hold up today all the complexities of our lives, the complexities of human society, the arduous task of working together on justice, peace, and transformation of society. Today, we are keenly aware of the breadth and depth of life as we welcome into our community a new baby and sit in love and compassion with one who is preparing to leave this life. May we know that whatever life brings us, whatever concerns and challenges are part of our lives, we are beloved and we are supported by this community, which means so much to us. Today, we are also aware that we are not passive members of our society and the world community. Each of us is called to do our work to make the world a better place. May we commit ourselves to the work, the inner work it takes to discern the work for peace and justice that we are called to do. This we ask in the name of all that is holy. Amen. So I've been thinking about the topic for this morning for many months, and it's sort of emerged over a long period of time through many conversations with folks who have expressed since the emergence of COVID that next year is bound to be better. Did anybody here have that thought? And yet, challenges seem to emerge with each subsequent year since COVID hit. Each new year has had challenges and frustrations. I know someone who makes a Christmas ornament each year, and the ornament is meant to sum up the year that's just ending. So in 2019, she made this really lovely, cute ornament that was a dumpster fire. So each of her friends and family members got a picture of a dumpster with flames coming out of it. Now, after that, I moved here, so I haven't seen the ornaments that she's made since then, but she has a wonderfully bizarre sense of humor, so I'm sure they're just as interesting. Her reaction to dramatic shifts in how we perceive and live our lives isn't unique. Life does sometimes feel like a dumpster fire. Challenges have seemed to intensify, and there are times when we don't feel comfortable in our skin. So during these last years, I began to wonder if some of our unease or dis-ease rather than disease, although that might be part of it too, some of our dis-ease we are feeling is related on a physical level to the accelerating climate crisis. And I've been pondering about how we might cope in a meaningful way with our changing world. Certainly, climate change affects us in various ways. Recently, following the days of terrible air quality in New York, which graciously floated down to Lynchburg later, The Guardian posted an article focused on the universal topic now present in therapy sessions for patients in New York City. And that topic is climate change. Every therapist interviewed spoke of what they now call an urban dystopia stoked by an existential stress called eco-anxiety. Every patient the therapists saw since the air quality went downhill, every patient has spoken about their anxiety over climate change. And I think if we also expand that and look at how young adults are feeling about their prospects for the future, I think that would be magnified. So this article reinforced some of my thinking about how we live with climate change. And I want to thank Rick Barnes, who's traveling today. He shared a lot of great material and some of his wisdom from classes he's taught that focus in part on the effects of climate change. To live meaningful lives, I believe we need to be able to acknowledge climate change as part of our reality. More and more of us realize that the ecosystem we live in is changing faster than the human body can adapt to, which means that it's making us sick on many levels. Climate change is touching us in ways we may not acknowledge as being connected to climate change. Recently, I read a book review of allergic, how our immune system reacts to a changing world. It's by Dr. Teresa McPhail. I confess that I began reading the review because of my personal frustration that as I age, I develop more and more allergies. McPhail's research affirms that what many of us are experiencing. There is a drastic increase in life-threatening allergies and respiratory issues. Our modern lives and climate change have mixed to make life dangerous for millions of people. You know, I could have figured this out sooner, but I finally faced the reality that when we talk about climate change as out there in our external environment, we really need to be talking about climate change being present in us, in our internal environment, and as my teacher calls it, our inner ecosystem. Of course, scientists, psychologists, environmentalists have written about and discussed this reality for years. But like most of us, I've been looking at climate change as out there, an external reality. It happens in the world around us. Yet it's time for us to relate to climate change as an internal reality. The same climate change that puts polar bears, insects, and ecosystems at risk is part of our inner being also. We can no longer ignore this disease that touches every living thing. As people of faith who want to help make the world a better place, we're committed to continuous learning and transformation. So we must look at how the world is part of us, climate change as part of us. It's time, my friends, to acknowledge that eco-anxiety is a reality in us. One of the images that Rick Barnes shared with me and encouraged me to share today focuses on the health impacts of climate change. So, David, thank you for finding a better copy of this image. Okay, so we've got several layers at which we're being impacted. Of course, the big physical impacts are things like wildflowers maybe, but in this instance, it's wildfires, flooding, drought, heat stress, changing temperatures, rising sea levels, changing growing seasons. I remember years ago when I was working with an ecologist from the Institute of Ecology at the University of Georgia, he was talking about the instance of the rising levels of pollen, and that's a distress mechanism for plants and trees. He also said that eventually all this part of the United States will be grasslands. And that sort of freaked me out when he told me that, because I love our trees. So if we step a little closer to ourselves from the physical impacts, we've got human systems and infrastructure impacts, transportation networks, urban and rural infrastructure, food security and crop production. We can, I'm sure, all think about stories, people we've met, economic sectors and services, human livelihoods, energy infrastructure, human security. In terms of us personally, we're talking about mental health impacts, hopelessness, threats to our identity, complicated grief, strains on our relationships, substance abuse, mental health emergencies, and the list goes on. There are physical health impacts, impaired fetal development, changes in fitness, physical trauma, broken bones, although not pegs, asthma risk, heat-related illnesses, disease, increased exposure to pests and toxins, allergies, increased toxicity of poison ivy, which we've had in our community in the last couple of weeks. Then also there are community health impacts, increased interpersonal aggression and domestic abuse, disrupted sense of continuity and belonging, decreased community cohesion. Thank you. My neck is not, my brain isn't turning with my neck. Increased violence and crime, increased social instability. That's a little overwhelming to think about, isn't it? So I think it's important for us to address the growing crisis. Climate change will become more and more a part of our daily lives, whether it's flooding, tornadoes, droughts, climate immigrants, weather patterns, the disappearance of pollinators. We know the issues and patterns in the larger world. The graphic we saw shows ways that we are all shaped by climate change. One example of how climate change affects many comes from Teresa McPhail in her book, Allergic. She writes, allergy sufferers are the canaries in the coal mine. Allergy rates are just going to keep climbing. Our bodies are not comfortable. We are irritating ourselves to death. So let's just, I know this is daunting, but let's just sit with this for a minute. Let's consider the climate change that we see happening around the world is happening inside us. I find that unnerving. And how do we make sense of that? How do we live with that? You know, some of us here may have a sense that there are changes in our mental or physical health that are being impacted by environmental changes. Do we feel comfortable in our skin and in our place in the world? And there are times when I try to think about what that means to have climate change inside of me, a picture. One day last week, I was having one of those terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days, and I felt like, oh, I'm experiencing an electrical storm inside me. Another day with different events brought a feeling of not being able to liberate myself from the overwhelming pollen around me. Are there thoughts, feelings, changes in our health that possibly resonate with what's happening with climate change? As we live into greater awareness of our place within climate change, we might consider the title of one of my favorite books, How Then Shall We Live? This is perhaps One of the essential questions today that we need to ask ourselves, for how we answer that question will impact how we're going to care for ourselves and the earth. How do we answer that question? Will our answer change the way we live? And I've been thinking about, as someone whose job it is to help us find ways to live meaningful lives, I have to say that I'm struggling with this along with you. I'm searching for ways to support us as we encounter our own experience of eco-anxiety. I don't have the answers, but I have some thoughts, and I'm ready to explore with you how we find answers that will help us. In the midst of all this serious exploration, and actually this week I was like, well, this is a Debbie Downer sermon. There is certainly more to our lives than eco-anxiety. One part of our life together needs to include sharing how we live with eco-anxiety and its implications. Then, as we hold that awareness, we also need to find joy, delight, hope, and love in the midst of the chaos. Because let's face it, we know that the earth and her creatures are still glorious and wondrous and mysterious, and that's one reason we want to protect our Mother Earth. They too are part of us because we are part of the earth. Moving forward, it's time to develop a healthy sense of self-preservation that must include a deeper commitment to the preservation of Mother Earth. It's time for us to fall deeply in love with the earth, as if our lives depended on it, and they do depend on it. Therapists and scientists alike urge us to spend time in nature. Our inner biomes will be healthier if we play in the dirt, plant and garden, rehab trails on the AT. If we become lost in the incredible beauty of the earth, then we will have a deeper commitment to the beauty and wonder of life. I think also going forward, community becomes more essential for us as we live our lives. We need one another for support as we experience environmental changes that affect us in many ways. It's also time for us to slow down enough to focus on living more simply. I know I'm preaching to the choir here because there's so many people in our community who live sustainably. But we all need to do our inner work to understand that we need not contribute to environmental destruction by purchasing objects that we think are going to solve our problems or make us happy. We can work for climate justice by changing how much we consume. We know that. We're called to make a bigger commitment. Therefore, we need to work to opt out of capitalism as much as we can. That's really hard to do. Every little bit will help us and help the earth. We also need to act politically to support laws and policies that will slow and hopefully eventually reverse the impacts of climate change. As concerned as we are about our future, our grandchildren's future, and the future of all living creatures, it's time to change how we live. This is not new. We've all known this for decades. But now more than ever, we are called to celebrate the web of life. We're so privileged to be part of that web. And so many of the stressors on the web of life are caused by humanity. But let us work to make sure that our lives affirm our love for the earth and all living beings. I invite us to rise in body or spirit as we share hymn number 175. We celebrate the web of life.
Please join me as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our words of benediction come from Brian Doyle. We're only here for a minute. We're here for a little window, and to use that time to catch and share shards of light and laughter and grace seems to me the great story. May this tale of grace and delight be one we tell with our lives. Amen. Thank you.